rights violations on a daily basis. Let me take a moment to talk about terminology first, though. At GATE, we use the term trans with an asterisk to indicate that we talk about people transgressing gender norms, and especially the Western binary kind. We come in many different shades and colors and are known by many names in different cultures, such as hija, meti, katoi, fafafina, fakaleiti, travesti, mushe, two-spirit, genderqueer, transgender, transsexual, just to name a few. Some of these names are proud names, while others carry stigma or even disgust in their cultural road. We share our experiences of identifying as a gender different from most people with our kinds of birth levels. Many of us share experiences of rejection and violence as a result. As different as we are, and the societies in which we live, many of us share problems in the same areas. For one, being recognized by society and our governments as whole people, especially when we try to access identifying documents with the names that we use in our daily lives and the gender that we wish to express. Many of us face violence and discrimination on a daily basis. And in fact, in the last 2 years alone, Transgender Europe has documented over 500 murders of trans people worldwide. Mind you, these are only the cases that are accessible through the internet with a few common search terms. Many countries in the world that we know from hearsay have had murders against trans people. We just don't have the documentation to prove that these are in fact transphobic hate crimes. Access to healthcare is an issue for most of us, as many doctors outright refuse to treat us even for a gunshot wound. At the same time, trans women and men who have sex with men are the group most affected by HIV globally, yet it is also the group most overlooked in efforts to fight the spread of the disease. Last but not least, employment and education are denied to many of us, especially when our trans identities become known. All these issues are currently unaddressed or grossly inadequately addressed within the framework of the UN. This is further complicated by the fact that while issues around sexual orientation and gender identity overlap, they are far from identical. Some countries that are leaders on sexual orientation issues are also the perpetrators of serious human rights abuses against trans people. And I would like to applaud Colombia in like to see more inclusion of gender identity in resolutions, statements, and declarations. A positive example is the joint statement of last December and the inclusion of gender identity in the most recent version of the South African draft resolution under consideration now. A negative example is the resolution on extrajudicial executions of last December, which despite earlier positive signals did not contain a reference to gender identity, even though trans people are most often affected by these murders. We would also like to see an exploration of human rights violations against trans people within the framework of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and her office. The Commissioner could, for example, commission a research into human rights violations in connection with the issuing of ID documents that I mentioned earlier. The Commissioner of Human Rights of the Council of Europe will publish a report containing this information for the Council of Europe member states in 2 weeks' time, and it would be extremely valuable if the High Commissioner would follow this example and give us an overview of the actual legal situation around the world. We would like to see gender identity issues raised in the UPR process on a much more consistent basis. In the past, and we will continue to do so in the future, we have provided states with issues that affect trans people specifically. And we would like to see those issues raised, and we would be very happy to assist governments in formulating their questions or answer their own questions that they might have around what kind of questions you might want to ask of your fellow other countries. We would like to see gender-based violence against trans people be raised in bodies that address violence against women and gender-based violence more in general. The CEDAW and the CSW are excellent opportunities to explore the gender-based violence that trans people face for transgressing the gender norms that do not fit us. Other UN bodies that can and should be working on gender identities issues are the WHO, for example, which should work to remove gender identity disorder from the list of personality disorders in its international classification of diseases. The UNDP and UNAIDS have already started to work on with some trans communities in the framework of HIV/AIDS prevention, but this needs to be intensified. Much more input from diverse trans communities needs to be sought in the process. The UNHCR should intensify its existing work for trans refugees and make asylum procedures better accessible to trans people in imminent danger. And last but not least, UNICEF and UNESCO should work on the rights of trans and gender non-conforming children and their access to education, healthcare, and safe housing. At the country level, governments should invest in first educating themselves by listening to trans groups and organizations about their needs, about our needs, and make or commission reports on the legal and social situation of trans people in their country. This should include both legal residents and undocumented immigrants, especially in richer countries. The key issues mentioned earlier should be looked into specifically, as well as other issues that local trans communities identify. Based on this knowledge, or parallel to gathering this knowledge, countries should systematically engage to address the obstacles that trans people face in their daily lives. In other words, producing a report should not keep you from working on the obvious. Some countries already do so, as we have heard from Colombia, even though gender identities issues were not addressed by you. Talk about Belgium. Belgium has produced a very extensive report on being transgender in Belgium, which can be accessed in English, French, and Dutch as an example of good practice. I hope that these suggestions give you some ideas on how to proceed in the future, and please do not